Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and compassionate degrowth as a result of those mechanisms. What do I mean by compassionate degrowth? I mean, if there is a road or if there is a way that we might be able to magically mitigate or counter climate change, it would involve something like a compassionate degrowth scenario, where we would have to figure out a way to kindly and hopefully very quickly bring down population levels, production levels, fossil fuel burning levels, et cetera. And we would also have to do many other things to mitigate some other feedbacks. It's a very tall order. In all likelihood that we can't do anything in time to save ourselves. The road of compassionate degrowth is one that would enable us to have some grace about our demise and to do as little damage as possible on the way out. If you discovered, if you discovered that you were doing something very, that was hurting somebody, and or maybe, let's say, I'm trying to think of a scenario. Let's say you did something to somebody that caused them to have a terminal illness, and you had no idea that you were doing this thing. Let's say it's 50, 60 years ago, and you were a constant smoker, and let's say your child developed cancer, and let's say that you knew somehow that your smoking was related to their cancer. It was terminal. There was no way that they were going to be saved. They were going to die. Would you continue to smoke in the face of that news? Would you just be like, well, guess I'm going to smoke still? You probably wouldn't. You probably would be racked with guilt. You probably would want to cause the least amount of harm to your child as they were on their way out of this world. You would just want to cease your negative and destructive behavior if you knew that that is what had caused someone else's demise. And that's the scenario that I can think of as far as human beings in the earth. We are destroying the earth. And once we wake up to that fact, even if we cannot save ourselves or the earth, the best course is to cause as little harm on the way out, not to continue to just be like, well, screw it. We're going to just live it up and hack and, pollute and chop everything to death on our way out. That's not what we want to do. So just to explain what I mean by that. As always, there's lots to cover. I gave up, or I have kind of given up trying to stagger out articles, because so many articles come at me every single day and so much information comes at me every single day that I basically just try to get through as many things as possible in one video, because the very next day brings just this whole just a barrage, just a pile of stuff for me to wade through. And I don't have, it's very difficult to have the time to even wade through it. So it's actually quite warm here all of a sudden. It was very warm today. I suspect an underreporting of temperatures, because it was definitely felt low 80s today. And they didn't want to say anything about it being 80 degrees. There was also lots of guys in the sky. So what I noticed, I was looking at some temperatures around the country today as well, and I noticed that there was some looks like some severe weather whiplash happening this week in a lot of areas. And lo and behold, I open up Facebook and here's this article And it looks like there's this huge trough of cold air, yet more polar vortexing. Um, and it's coming to us very soon, or to most of the country very soon. This is from today. Coldest air in years next week. So this is coming next week. Let's see. Let's read this. West Michigan. We've had some cold air recently, but winter is going to be felt very soon in a way that we haven't felt in quite some time. Have we? Because it seems like this happens every year. It's been since the winter of 2014-15 that we've seen a couple of days that didn't reach double-digit high temperatures. I believe we've got a good shot at that, and more by the middle of next week. I think there's at least one day. Did they mean low? I think they meant low temperatures. I think there's at least one day that's going to struggle to get to about 0. If West Michigan doesn't end up getting above 0, it would be the coldest air we have seen since January of 1994. Historically speaking, high temperatures at or below 0 have only happened 8 times. Either way, some of our forecast wind chills are incredibly dangerous. Just look at this map for the middle of next week. It's so cold in the upper Midwest that it exceeds our color table. I think West Michigan is likely to expect wind chills between minus 25 to minus 35 below 0 for a good period of time at minimum. Frostbite with these temperatures would occur in 15 minutes or less. Yeah, I saw that it was going to be quite cold in many areas of the country, especially the upper Midwest. So there's a map here of forecasted temperatures. Minus 56 in Grand Forks, minus 48 in Minot, minus 45 in Bismarck, minus 42 in Minneapolis, minus 40 in Chicago, minus 42 in Moline. That is pretty insane. Minus 20 in St. Louis. So it's going to be really, really chilly. Everybody get ready for that. Moving on, I'm going to link that below. Moving on. I saw this the last couple of days. I was trying to get to this yesterday, but I didn't even get a video out yesterday. Mass death of wild horses discovered in scorching dry Central Australian waterhole. Climate State just did a video on this, I believe, if you all haven't seen that. Mass wild horse death at the base of a dry waterhole in Central Australia has been blamed on an extreme heat wave in the region. Around 20 feral horses have been discovered in a dry waterhole in remote Central Australia. Orente man Ralph Turner said it was the first time he had seen anything like it. The region is heading towards its 13th day in a row above 42°C. So there's a picture here of many, many dead horses. Around 24 brumbies in various stages of decomposition have been discovered strewn along a 100-meter stretch of a swimming spot called Deep Hole, 20 kilometers from the remote community of Santa Teresa. The region has hit a record 12-day run of temperatures above 42 degrees Celsius, and it is poised to hit 13 days in Alice Springs on Wednesday. So I'm going to link this below. Y'all can check that out if you have not seen it already. Moving on to a story from Huffington Post. Americans have lost faith in their ability to move from poverty to riches. And this was actually headlined in the link as Americans have lost faith in capitalism. More than 2/3 said it's no longer commonplace for hard work to be a path from poverty to wealth, according to a new World Economic Forum poll. This is out of Davos, Switzerland. People in the United States and other developed countries are losing faith in the capitalist system to improve their lives, according to a new global poll commissioned by the World Economic Forum, published on the eve of its annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland. Almost 2/3 of U.S. respondents said it was no longer commonplace for hard work to be a sure path from poverty to riches, with only 10% saying it was extremely common. The lack of faith in the current system to deliver upward mobility was even more marked in Western Europe, where only 1/5 of respondents said it was common to be able to start poor and become wealthy through hard work. Developing nations have the most faith in upward mobility. Well, maybe so. According to the poll, which surveyed more than 10,000 people over 29 countries, India showed the most optimism, with 69% of those polled saying they believe the existing system allows them to have control over improving their economic destiny. Well, hang out with capitalism for a couple more years, India, and see what it brings you. Capitalism has also brought India some pretty nasty things, which I think that these people are probably ignoring, like pollution, air pollution, chemical pollution, farmers committing suicide because they've been planting GMO crops and everything's going under. Also, floods, drought, high heat, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all good on the shiny outside, of course. But I'm glad somebody's optimistic. Moving on to a article. I don't know who posted this in the comments, but I'm pretty sure maybe it's where I got it. This is from Live Science, and this is quite old. This is from 2014, blazing world record, strongest UV rays measured in South America. This is just to piggyback on the UV discussion we were having. A perfect storm of ozone-destroying chemicals sent cancer-causing UVB radiation soaring at the top of a South American volcano in 2003, a new study reports. So this is quite old data. Who knows what it is now or what's going on now? Seems to be a lot of confusion about that. On December 29th, 2003, a world record UV index of 43.3, good God, detected at Bolivia's Licancambur volcano. The UV index is used to forecast the strength of the sun's ultraviolet rays. If you understand that like a UV reading of like 4 or 5 is normal, 43, 10 is extremely dangerous. So 43 is like, I don't know how to put that into context. I mean, it's just UV index of 43 is similar to the surface radiation on Mars than typical conditions on Earth, and the reading is well above the mid-20s, routinely measured in the high Andes, said study author Natalie Cabral. Okay. Once in a lifetime, the question asks. Yeah, it would be really nice if we had like a big, deep, extensive, not just UV readings, but a UV study, a UV, I'm really curious, and everybody seems to be very, very curious about this question. There are a lot of independent alternative channels, YouTube channels that do, UV readings pretty regularly, and they are all high all the time. It seems like, especially in the Western United States, there seems to be an ongoing high UV readings. And that's really scary news, right? If the new normal is not 4 or 5, but 10 or 12, what is that doing to people? What is that doing to plants? What is that doing to animals, et cetera? It would be really good if we could know the answers to these questions. Moving on to this story from G. Captain. Europe's most important river is running dry as glaciers shrink. This is from January 21, 2019. My dog is singing like a wolf. Let's see. This is by William Wilkes, Vanessa Desem, and Brian Parkin. Kevin Kilp's car ferry churns the water of Germany's Rhine River as he steers towards the bank opposite Kaub, the scenic village just south of the rocky outcropping named after the legendary siren Lorelei. It's typically a busy stretch of waterway. On a normal day, the commuter ferry vies for space with cargo barges shuttling supplies to factories in the south and German goods to ports on the North Sea, as well as tourist boats heading for nearby medieval castles and vineyards. After a prolonged summer drought, the bustling traffic at one of the shallowest points on the Rhine ground to a halt for nearly a month late last year, choking off a critical transport artery. The impact damped Germany's industrial machine, slowing economic growth in the third and fourth quarters. It was the latest sign of how even advanced industrial economies are increasingly fighting the effects of global warming. You can see the water levels are lower each year, said Kilps, who added extra flotation equipment to the 150-ton boat during the stoppage to enable it to finally cross the river again. It's scary to watch the climate changing. Gosh, all you denier guys that jump on this channel and are like, blah. Here's another, somebody making this up? Somebody inventing this? Is this a false story? It is not. This is actually happening. Yeah. Yeah, nobody's making this up, guys. Come on. Just, there's only so much, obvious evidence that you can deny to make up, to keep going with your fantasies. With its source high in the Swiss Alps, the Rhine makes 800 miles, snakes 800 miles through the industrial zones of Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands before emptying into the sea at Rotterdam, Europe's busiest port. It serves as a key conduit for manufacturers such as Daimler AG, Robert Bosch GmbH, and Bayer AG. They love all these letters, AG, GmbH. When low water halted shipping this summer, steelmaker ThyssenKrupp AG was forced to delay shipments to customers like automaker Volkswagen AG as it couldn't get raw materials to a mill in Duisburg. Hold on one second. I'm just laughing at this AG-ness, the AG-ness of it all. That's crazy though. So industrial civilization being halted by low river water levels. Hold on. Oh, okay. So I didn't know what AG meant. It means something like incorporated in German. It stands for Aktiengesellschaft. Aktiengesellschaft. So there you go. If you didn't know, now you know. Now I know. It was just bothering me not to know. We have already seen constraints on the Rhine cost BASF SE around 250 million euros or $285 million by pushing the chemical maker to use more expensive transport options. In a recent newspaper interview, BASF Chief Executive Officer Martin Brudermüller called for the major infrastructure investments such as locks and dams that can release water to ensure shipping lanes remain open. We've already seen effects on national economic growth, said Oliver Rakow, chief German economist at Oxford Economics. The problem is related to global warming and can happen again. Yeah. That's all I'm going to read of that. I'm going to link it below and move on to the last article that I wanted to read for this video. I'm going to try and read the whole thing. It's kind of long, but we'll see. Real quickly, if you want to get some good laughs, I'll find this video if I can. I'll find the link. It's Joe Rogan interviewing a New York Times columnist who was out to slander Tulsi Gabbard, and she called her an Assad toady. And then Joe Rogan asked her what toady meant, and she was like, I don't know, or like, and then she spelled it wrong. Hilarious stuff, and kudos to Joe Rogan. But what's it's hilarious and also very scary because these are the kind of people that are writing articles for the New York Times, just doing the bidding of whomever, the corporate class, in trying to sideline and disparage progressive Democratic candidates, because um, they need their nice little corporate candidates to be the ones that get through the gates. And we will see who gets through the gates. Anyways, that's just a little aside. It's pretty hilarious. If you haven't seen the video, somewhere in the comment section, somebody linked another video discussing just that. It's like a little shorter roundup of that section of the video. It's pretty funny stuff. Maybe I'll link both if I can find them. To finish up this video, this is from Counterpunch, from David Swanson, from Today. The world will end in fire. Proclaiming that the end is nigh has now become the labor of the very opposite of a deluded religious devotee. And that is interesting, isn't it? And the question framed by Robert Frost of whether the world will end in fire or ice is no longer in dispute. The world will soon end in fire, possibly the fire of the Pentagon's usable nuclear weapons, certainly the fire of anthropogenic climate collapse. Not only will the world not end in ice, but the vanishing of ice from the Earth is helping to rapidly render this planet uninhabitable for humans and many other species. As we observe up close in Dart Jamel's new book, The End of Ice, bearing witness and finding meaning in the path of climate disruption, great masses of ice are melting away. This is what's happening. Glacier National Park will soon lack any glaciers. Greenland, the ice-covered land, falsely labeled green and distorted by northern prejudice to appear larger than Africa on most Western maps. That is actually pretty funny. If y'all haven't seen the juxtapositions, is being transformed into something you can spray through a hose or drown in. Ice that most of us have never seen, but upon which our lives depend, is disappearing not just quickly, but at a rate that is constantly becoming quicker and even quicker and quicker still. The permafrost in the Arctic, Jamel tells us, is thawing and releasing methane, and could at any moment release methane equivalent to several times the total carbon dioxide released by humans ever. Barring that catastrophe, the feedback loops or vicious cycles are real and underestimated. When the glaciers melt, the streams warm up or dry up, ecosystems collapse, forests burn, and the glaciers melt more. By 2015, forests in California had become climate polluters rather than CO2 reducers. Jamel finds that every single worst case scenario predicted by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change regarding temperature, sea level, severe weather, and CO2 in the atmosphere has fallen short. In fact, Jamel explains why the IPCC is generally not just excessively conservative, but 10 years out of date. That figure places the IPCC's late 2018 report claiming that humanity has 12 years left in which to change its ways and avert disaster in a harsh light. Meaning if they're 10 years late, they're basically giving you the news that they should have given you in 2008. Meaning that, who was it that said we had 2 years to turn climate change around? I can't remember, but meaning that they're more on the pace. While that IPCC report came out after Jamel wrote The End of Ice, it can add little perspective to a book that looks at our state of affairs far more clearly. Yet the fact that I am writing this review months before the book and this review will be published strikes me as somewhat obscene. What's a quarter of a year anyways to wait to publish a silly book review? Well, it's an eighth of the 2 years one might conclude we have left to work with. But that would be clinging to fantasy. There is no preventing utter disaster. Yet there is urgency. The need is to work to slow the collapse and to mitigate its impacts and provide aid to each other as it washes over us. The End of Ice takes us on a tour of magnificent and critically wounded areas of the Earth, beginning in Alaska on Denali, which is changing, melting dramatically. In many of the locations that Jamel takes us to, people have observed the warming for decades. Many people in the developed world, Jamel suggests, have not been connected enough to a place to notice, at least until now, when it is too late. As Jamel travels the planet, he meets with top scientists Local officials and other observers of what's happening. One makes the point about Alaska being out of sight and out of mind. If this was happening in California, every one of these changes would be front page news. That is why you've had no idea that Alaska's glaciers are losing an estimated 70 billion tons of ice every year. Of course, that's a very partial explanation of denialism, which has, by definition, consisted of denying something, not of being unaware of it. The news has been unwanted, especially by those paid not to want it. While Sarah Palin could see Russia from Alaska, there was no evidence that she saw Alaska from Alaska. In South Florida, which is doomed to go underwater, insurance rates are skyrocketing. The lengths of mortgages are shrinking, and construction, including of nuclear reactors, is booming. A grave for humanity might bear the word ignorance, or it might just as appropriately display an image of Ronald Reagan ripping solar panels off the White House roof. Those living in some fortunate untouched inland suburb will not have the benefit of a lengthy warning in the form of direct impact. They can only warn themselves by carrying what's happening in other places ravaged by drought and flooding and storms and heat. Rather than sitting in the mythical warming pot alongside the poor slandered frog who actually knows better, people are on the comfortable stovetop next to the pot, about to be engulfed as the pot boils over. Jamail finds his visits to natural wonders bittersweet and takes extra pleasure in spending time with doomed places, but I don't think he intends to encourage morbid tourism. When he visits the Matanuska Glacier, he finds privatized profiteering from visits to the glacier's receding edge. As the glacier melts, chainsaws take down trees, construction noise echoes, and ATVs buzz about, knowingly turning up the heat that such last chance tourism industries fully feel. Millions of humans depend on glaciers for drinking water. The countries where over half of humanity lives are overpumping their aquifers. The rising sea levels accelerated by the melting ice will render a significant portion of humanity homeless. I fear that, beyond the physical feedback loops that scientists tell Jamail about, human feedback loops could worsen the coming crisis. If people respond with greed, fear, bigotry, corruption, and violence, they will make matters far worse immediately. And by further fueling the climate collapse, building walls to keep out refugees, and promoting the idea that climate disaster produces war all by itself without any human involvement, it would seem from many such predictions, is a recipe for catastrophe, possibly of the nuclear sort. What to do is not the focus of the end of ice, but some ideas come through. Beyond that, of enjoying what time we have. First, I think we must cease adding to the methane and CO2, as war is the biggest producer of CO2 around. Making plans to use war as a response to climate collapse is one of the dumber moves available, as the meat industry is one of the greatest producers of methane around. Enjoying some delicious end of times cooked flesh is not the solution. We need a radical reworking of our culture into the sort of society that could have survived had it reformed itself 30 years sooner. Then we need to mitigate the damage by helping those in need. We need to relocate people and other species out of the areas that are going underwater, and not just people, but the worst of their physical creations, as measured by the degree to which they will poison the oceans if left behind. As long as there is some hope of reducing the speed or enormity of the damage, I will find an exclusive focus on mitigation to be an outrage. But even more outrageous is the fact that right now our society isn't even trying to mitigate the damage. Let me read that sentence again because I was a little confused. As long as there is some hope of reducing the speed or enormity of the damage, I will find an exclusive focus on mitigation to be an outrage. Okay. I'm not understanding that sentence. Maybe somebody can help me out. Even more outrageous is the fact that right now our society isn't even trying to mitigate the damage. I've never shared the widespread interest in hope or despair. We have a moral responsibility to do what needs doing. What more has to be said? But the work of the doctor narrator in Albert Camus' The Plague, which I referred people to as a model, is not quite right, or at least could be misleading. The importance of preparing for the plague at the first signs of it must be increased dramatically, and one cannot simply plod along working long hours until the plague has run its course. This plague ends us before it runs its course. We have to dedicate ourselves to ending with dignity and kindness, with the closest thing we can manage to the grace and wisdom that could have saved us. And then we have to rededicate ourselves to redoubling our efforts again and again with ever greater effort as we continue. The alternative of giving up is guaranteed not to be more enjoyable than working well together on a crisis that could bring out the best in us. The alternative of pretending everything is normal, scorning radical activism, and contenting ourselves with voting in yet another most important election of our lifetime every 2 years is guaranteed to create a crisis of faith and a crisis of guilt. Let's not go there, or rather, let's not stay there. Hope you all enjoyed that article from David Swanson. I found it to be pretty good, and he talks about something of a compassionate degrowth situation or scenario, as in let's try to mitigate with kindness as much as possible in our waning days. The chances that we just go Mad Max are fairly high, but we don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. We don't have to choose that by not choosing something better. We don't have to just, go, oh, well, we can really try and make at least some kind of stand for compassion and for kindness and for, as David Swanson said in this article, for working together on this crisis, even knowing that maybe we won't succeed. That is all I have for you tonight. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.